Commander Zekthar had seen death in 1,000 forms across the galaxy. His 4 arms bore the ritual scars of the Vorthak warrior caste, each mark telling a story of conquest on distant worlds. His species had dominated 3 star systems, crushing resistance with calculated precision and overwhelming force. The humans of Earth were supposed to be just another primitive species awaiting subjugation. The intelligence reports had been promising. A young species that had barely escaped their home planet's gravity well. Their technology seemed crude compared to the quantum weaponry and energy shields of the Vorthak Empire. Most encouraging of all, humans appeared to be fragile creatures with thin skin, weak bones, and laughably short lifespans. The invasion fleet had approached Earth expecting an easy victory. Zekthar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Bone Crusher, watching the blue-green world grow larger in the view screen. His superior, Fleet Admiral Gorthux, was already planning the victory celebration. The humans had detected their approach weeks ago but showed no signs of fleeing their homeworld. Foolish creatures, Zekthar thought. They probably don't even understand what's coming for them. The first orbital bombardment was meant to be a demonstration of power. 3 major cities would be reduced to glass, and then the humans would surrender as every other species had done. The quantum cannons charged with their familiar high-pitched whine, energy readings climbing toward maximum output. Zekthar felt the familiar excitement of impending conquest flowing through his veins. But something went wrong with the bombardment. The energy beams struck some kind of planetary defense grid that the reconnaissance teams had completely missed. Massive shield generators hidden beneath the Earth's surface flared to life, absorbing and redirecting the quantum blasts back into space. The first sign that this invasion would be different from all the others was watching their own weapons fire harmlessly scatter against an impossible defense. Admiral Gorthux ordered an immediate ground assault. If orbital bombardment couldn't break the humans, then boots on the ground would. Zekthar led the first wave personally, commanding 5,000 of the Empire's finest shock troops. They descended in armored drop pods toward what human communications identified as New York City. Intelligence suggested this was a major population center where resistance would be minimal. The moment Zekthar's pod cracked open on a rubble-strewn street, he knew they had made a terrible mistake. The air itself seemed to vibrate with danger. Human structures lay in ruins around them, but there were no bodies, no signs of panic or evacuation. The city was empty, but it didn't feel abandoned. It felt like a trap. His troops formed defensive positions among the broken concrete and twisted metal. Their energy weapons hummed with readiness, armor systems running full diagnostics. Everything appeared normal, but Zekthar's combat instincts were screaming warnings. In 30 years of warfare across the galaxy, he had learned to trust those instincts. The attack came from everywhere and nowhere. One moment, his troops were scanning empty buildings for signs of human resistance. The next moment, those buildings exploded outward as creatures emerged that bore no resemblance to the fragile beings from their intelligence reports. These humans moved with fluid precision, using the urban environment like an extension of their own bodies. They appeared and vanished like ghosts, striking with weapons that seemed to ignore armor plating entirely. Sergeant Krexmol was the first to die. A human warrior appeared behind him as if materializing from thin air, drove a simple metal blade between armor plates with surgical precision, and vanished again before Krexmol's body hit the ground. The blade had found the one weak point in armor that had protected its wearer through a dozen campaigns. It should have been impossible. More of Zekthar's soldiers fell in the opening moments than he had lost in entire planetary conquests. These humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They used their environment as a weapon, turning rubble into projectiles, collapsed buildings into cover, and gravity itself into an ally, as they leaped between structures with impossible agility. The humans' weapons were primitive by Vorthak standards, but they used them with devastating effectiveness. Chemical explosives that should have been obsolete technology tore through energy shields as if they weren't there. Kinetic projectile weapons punched through armor with relentless efficiency. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to know exactly where to aim, targeting weak points in Vorthak equipment with uncanny accuracy. But it wasn't the weapons that made Zekthar's blood run cold. It was the way the humans fought. They showed no fear of death, charging directly into energy weapon fire to get close enough for hand-to-hand combat. When wounded, they fought even more viciously, as if pain only made them stronger. When cornered, they smiled. Zekthar watched in horror as a single human female, barely half his size, systematically dismantled a squad of his best warriors. She moved through their formations like death itself, anticipating every tactical response, turning their own training against them. When she finally fell to concentrated fire, she had taken 7 Vorthak soldiers with her and was still trying to crawl toward the nearest enemy position. The ground assault that was supposed to last hours stretched into days. Every building had to be cleared room by room. Every street corner could hide an ambush. The humans used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They fought from shadows, struck without warning, and disappeared before retaliation was possible. They turned their own city into a maze of death traps and killing zones. On the 3rd day of fighting, Zekthar received reports that chilled him to his core. Human reinforcements were arriving, but not in ships or vehicles. They were coming on foot, streaming into the city from all directions. Millions of them, all armed, all showing the same terrifying eagerness for battle that had characterized their defenders. These newcomers weren't even soldiers. Intelligence identified them as civilians, workers, families, children barely old enough to carry weapons. But they fought with the same savage intensity as trained warriors. They worked together with perfect coordination, despite having no apparent military structure. They adapted to Vorthak tactics in real time, learning from every engagement and passing that knowledge instantly to others. By the end of the first week, Zekthar's invasion force had been reduced by half. The humans had lost 10 times as many fighters. But they kept coming. For every human that fell, 2 more appeared to take their place. They showed no sign of breaking, no hint of surrender, no indication that they even understood the concept of defeat. Admiral Gorthux authorized the use of bioweapons, something the Empire had never needed to deploy against a primitive species. Plague bombs fell on human positions, releasing engineered viruses that should have decimated their population. The humans adapted. Within days, they had developed countermeasures, turning abandoned medical facilities into treatment centers and somehow engineering immunity to weapons that had taken the Empire decades to perfect. The moment Zekthar truly understood what they were fighting came during a night assault on a human stronghold. His troops had cornered a group of human defenders in a collapsed subway station. The humans were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. By every tactical assessment, they should have surrendered. Instead, they sang. The sound echoed through the tunnels, a haunting melody that seemed to strip away pretense and reveal some fundamental truth about these creatures. They weren't just fighting for their city or their planet. They were fighting for something deeper, something that Zekthar couldn't understand but could feel in his bones. As the song continued, more voices joined from other parts of the city, from hidden positions and distant strongholds, until the entire urban battlefield resonated with their defiance. That was when Zekthar realized that the humans weren't the prey in this hunt. They were the predators, and his people had walked willingly into their domain. The empty city hadn't been abandoned in panic. It had been prepared as a killing ground, with every street and building turned into components of an enormous trap. The humans had let them land. They had wanted the Vorthak to commit to ground combat in an environment of the humans' choosing. Every tactical advantage the invaders thought they possessed had been carefully accounted for and countered. This wasn't a desperate defense by a primitive species. This was a calculated demonstration by apex predators who had been waiting patiently for worthy opponents. As Zekthar watched his soldiers fall to enemies that fought like forces of nature, he began to understand that his species had made a fundamental error in judgment. They had assumed that physical frailty indicated weakness, that short lifespans meant timidity, that primitive technology suggested inferior capability. They had been catastrophically wrong on all counts. The humans were what every warrior aspired to become, but most species lacked the will to achieve. They had transformed their apparent weaknesses into strengths, their limitations into advantages, their mortality into motivation. They fought not despite their fragility, but because of it. With the desperate courage of creatures who knew that every moment of existence had to be earned through struggle. The breakthrough came on the 10th day of fighting when Zekthar's reconnaissance team intercepted human communications. What they heard changed everything he thought he understood about warfare, about courage, and about the nature of sentient life itself. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were studying their attackers. Every engagement, every tactical maneuver, every weapon deployment had been carefully observed and analyzed. The humans had been learning Vorthak's strengths and weaknesses with scientific precision while appearing to fight in desperate chaos. Their seemingly random attacks had been systematic experiments designed to test the limits of their enemies' capabilities. Most chilling of all, the humans had been holding back. Lieutenant Yexatar stumbled into the command post, his armor scarred and smoking. 3 of his 4 arms hung useless at his sides, and his breathing was labored through a cracked helmet seal. He had been leading a patrol through what the humans called Central Park, when they encountered something that defied every military manual in the Empire's archives. "Commander," Yextar gasped, "they have children fighting alongside their adults, but these children, they're not afraid. They're eager. They volunteer for the most dangerous missions, and they smile when they're given explosive devices to carry into our formations." Zekthar studied the tactical displays with growing unease. Human defensive positions showed a level of coordination that suggested a hive mind. But intelligence confirmed these were individuals making independent decisions. Somehow, millions of humans were acting with perfect synchronization while maintaining complete autonomy. It was theoretically impossible, yet undeniably real. The humans had also begun psychological warfare, unlike anything in Vorthak experience. They left audio recordings in positions they abandoned, messages in their own language that universal translators rendered into perfect Vorthak. The content was simple and terrifying. Detailed analyses of Vorthak military doctrine, accurate predictions of their next tactical moves, and gentle suggestions for improving their combat effectiveness. The messages weren't threats or propaganda. They were lessons, delivered with the patient tone of instructors teaching slow students. The humans were treating this invasion as an educational opportunity, and they were disappointed by their students' performance. On the 15th day, something unprecedented happened. A group of human representatives approached Vorthak lines under a white flag, requesting a temporary ceasefire for negotiations. Admiral Gorthus saw this as the first sign that human resistance was weakening and immediately agreed to the meeting. Zekthar was chosen to represent the Vorthak forces, partly for his tactical expertise and partly because he had developed an uncomfortable respect for their opponents. He met the human delegation in what had once been a park in the center of the city, surrounded by the ruins of both species' making. The lead human negotiator was unremarkable by Vorthak standards, small, soft, with pale skin and graying hair that suggested advanced age. She introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen, and her manner was polite, professional, and utterly confident despite being surrounded by alien warriors who could have killed her with a gesture. "Commander Zekthar," she began, consulting a tablet that somehow contained detailed information about his military service. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us. We have a proposal that might benefit both our species." Zekthar activated his armor's recording systems and tried to project the authority of a conquering force. "Humans surrender unconditionally or face total annihilation. Those are your options." Dr. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made Zekthar's combat instincts scream warnings. "I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation. We're not here to surrender. We're here to offer you an opportunity to withdraw with your forces intact." The absurdity of the statement almost made Zekthar laugh. His people controlled orbital space, had overwhelming technological advantages, and commanded forces that had conquered dozens of worlds. The humans were trapped on a single planet with primitive weapons and no apparent means of escape. "Perhaps," Dr. Chen continued, "you would like to understand what you're really fighting before you make your final decision." She gestured to her companions, who began displaying holographic images above their tablets. The first showed Earth from space, but not as Zekthar had seen it during their approach. This view revealed massive installations hidden beneath the planet's surface, orbital defense platforms that had somehow escaped detection, and most impossibly, what appeared to be ships departing the solar system. "This is Earth as it actually exists," Dr. Chen explained conversationally. "What your reconnaissance teams observed was what we wanted them to see. The cities you've been fighting in are duplicates, built specifically for this purpose. Our actual population centers are quite safe, thank you for asking." Zekthar's world tilted on its axis. If this was true, then everything about the invasion had been orchestrated by the humans themselves. They had allowed the Vorthak to land, guided them to specific locations, and manipulated every aspect of the conflict. The next image showed star charts marking dozens of systems beyond Earth. Each was labeled with dates, coordinates, and species identifications. Many of the species were ones the Vorthak Empire considered extinct. "We've been watching your expansion across the galaxy for quite some time," Dr. Chen continued. "Your methods are impressive, but somewhat predictable. You encounter a new species, evaluate their military capabilities, overwhelm them with superior technology, and absorb them into your empire. It's effective, but it lacks imagination." She paused to sip from a container of liquid, as casually as if they were discussing weather patterns instead of galactic conquest. "The species you've conquered aren't extinct, by the way. We've been relocating them to safe worlds beyond your current reach. Some were quite grateful for the rescue." The implications crashed over Zekthar like a tsunami. If humans had been monitoring Vorthak expansion, if they possessed the technology to relocate entire civilizations, if they had been manipulating this encounter from the beginning, then his species wasn't dealing with a primitive world. They were facing something far more advanced and dangerous than they had ever encountered. "What are you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen's smile became genuinely warm, like a grandmother explaining something obvious to a confused child. "We're explorers, Commander. We're scientists, artists, dreamers, and yes, when necessary, we're soldiers. But mostly we're curious. Your species represents the first militaristic civilization we've encountered that might actually be worth talking to." She activated another display, this one showing detailed schematics of Vorthak weapons, armor, and ship designs. Every system was labeled with vulnerability assessments and suggested improvements. The level of detail was impossible unless the humans had been studying Vorthak technology for decades. "We've been preparing for this meeting for 70 years, she explained. "Ever since our deep space monitoring stations detected your first expansion beyond your home system. We wanted to understand what kind of species you were, how you thought, how you fought, how you might fit into the larger galactic community." Zekthar felt something he had never experienced in 3 decades of warfare: complete strategic helplessness. Every assumption, Every tactical doctrine, every technological advantage he had relied upon was meaningless. The humans hadn't just outfought his forces, they had been playing an entirely different game from the beginning. This was all a test, he said, understanding flooding through him like ice water. A comprehensive evaluation, Dr. Chen corrected gently. We needed to know if your species could adapt, could learn, could recognize when they were outmatched. Some military civilizations are too rigid in their thinking to be reasoned with. Others are too aggressive to coexist peacefully with their neighbors. She stood up, smoothing her clothing with casual movements that somehow conveyed more threat than any weapon Zekthar had ever faced. The good news is that your forces have shown remarkable adaptability under pressure. Your soldiers learn from their mistakes. Your officers adjust their tactics based on new information. And your leadership is pragmatic enough to authorize this meeting when standard approaches proved insufficient. The final display showed the current state of the battle from a perspective that made Zekthar's blood freeze. Human forces had been maneuvering his troops like pieces on a game board, creating predetermined scenarios designed to test specific capabilities. Every Vorthak victory had been allowed, every defeat had been orchestrated, and every tactical decision had been anticipated and prepared for. Most terrifying of all, the display showed that human forces had been positioned to eliminate his entire ground force at any moment they chose. Thousands of hidden weapons emplacements, underground tunnel systems filled with explosives, and orbital bombardment coordinates that could turn the entire combat zone into molten glass. The humans had been fighting with one hand tied behind their backs, and they had still been winning. Your choice is simple, Dr. Chen concluded. You can continue this conflict and discover exactly how outmatched you are, or you can accept our offer of partnership. We're prepared to share technology, establish trade relationships, and help your species find a more sustainable path forward. Zekthar looked around at his honor guard, seeing his own shock reflected in their expressions. These humans had demonstrated capabilities that bordered on precognition, technology that made Vorthak equipment seem primitive, and tactical thinking that operated on timescales measured in decades rather than days. "What happens if we refuse?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Dr. Chen's expression became sad rather than threatening. "Then you'll join the other aggressive species we've encountered in the past. Your ships will develop navigation problems that strand them in empty space. Your homeworlds will experience equipment failures that make expansion impossible. Your military communications will become unreliable, and your weapons will mysteriously malfunction at critical moments." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We prefer cooperation to conflict, Commander. But we're very, very good at conflict when cooperation isn't possible." The meeting ended with Zekthar requesting time to consult with his superiors. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Dr. Chen approached him personally. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "This isn't the first time we've had this conversation. 3 other species have reached this point in their development. 2 of them chose partnership and have become valued allies. The 3rd chose continued aggression." She handed him a data tablet containing star charts. "These are the coordinates of the Kelthian Empire, or rather, where the Kelthian Empire used to be. They made their choice 50 years ago." Zekthar activated the tablet and saw empty space where intelligence reports indicated a thriving civilization should exist. No debris, no ruins, no trace that anything had ever been there at all. "What did you do to them?" he whispered. Dr. Chen's expression remained gentle, but her eyes held depths that spoke of capabilities beyond imagination. "We gave them exactly what they wanted. Eternal war against an enemy they could never defeat, fought in a place where they couldn't hurt anyone else." As she walked away, Zekthar realized that the title human was insufficient to describe what his species had encountered. These were beings who thought in geological timescales, who planned for possibilities that wouldn't arise for centuries, who possessed technology and wisdom accumulated over millennia of expansion across the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire had thought they were wolves hunting sheep. Instead, they had stumbled into the territory of something far more ancient and dangerous than they could comprehend. They had met their first real predators, and those predators were offering mercy. Admiral Gorthooks received Zekthar's report in stunned silence aboard the flagship Bone Crusher. The command deck, normally bustling with the efficient activity of conquest, felt like a tomb as the implications of the human revelations sank in. Every officer present understood that their entire worldview had just been shattered. "You're telling me," the Admiral said slowly, "that this entire invasion has been orchestrated by the humans themselves? That everything we've encountered was designed to evaluate our capabilities?" Zekthar nodded grimly. "The evidence is overwhelming, sir. They've been monitoring our expansion for decades. The cities we've been fighting in are duplicates built specifically for this purpose. Their actual population centers are hidden and completely secure." Fleet Tactical Officer Grixtal activated the holographic display showing their current strategic position. What had seemed like overwhelming Vorthak advantage now looked like a carefully prepared trap. Human ships had been detected moving through the outer system, their numbers and capabilities far exceeding what reconnaissance had suggested. "Sir," Communications Officer Velnath reported, "we're receiving transmissions from across our empire. Multiple systems are reporting equipment failures, navigation anomalies, and communication disruptions. The pattern matches what the humans described." Admiral Gorthuk stared at the tactical display, with the expression of someone watching their empire crumble in real time. The Vorthak military machine, which had seemed invincible just days earlier, was revealing itself to be a primitive force, stumbling blindly through a galaxy controlled by beings they had never truly understood. "How is this possible?" the Admiral whispered. "Our technology is advanced beyond anything these humans should possess. Our weapons can shatter planets, our shields can deflect stellar radiation, our ships can cross the galaxy in weeks rather than years." Zekthar consulted the data tablet Dr. Chen had given him, its contents becoming more disturbing with each review. "According to this information, sir, human technology operates on principles we haven't discovered yet. They've had faster-than-light travel for over 2 centuries. Their weapons aren't more powerful than ours. They're more precise. They don't need to shatter planets when they can simply make them uninhabitable for aggressive species while leaving them perfectly suitable for everyone else." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of ship systems that now seemed fragile and primitive. Every officer was coming to the same realization. They weren't just outgunned or outmaneuvered. They were operating in a completely different category of existence. Strategic analyst Korthvin had been studying human communication intercepts since the beginning of the invasion. His report painted an even more sobering picture. "Admirals, the humans aren't just more advanced than we realized. They're more numerous. Our estimates suggested a planetary population in the billions. Actual numbers appear to be in the trillions, spread across hundreds of systems." He activated displays showing the true scope of human civilization. Star maps revealed a vast network of colonies, industrial systems, and research installations spanning a significant portion of the galaxy. The primitive species the Vorthak had planned to conquer controlled territory larger than the entire empire. "They've been hiding their true capabilities for centuries," Korthvin continued. "Every species they've contacted has been given the impression that humans are younger and less advanced than they actually are. It's a systematic policy designed to prevent conflicts like this one." Admiral Gorthux sank into his command chair, the weight of command suddenly feeling crushing rather than empowering. "Why reveal themselves now? If they're this powerful, why allow us to invade at all?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice filled the bridge as her image appeared in the holographic display. Transmitted from the planet's surface with technology that had somehow bypassed every security protocol in the Vorthak fleet. "Admiral Gorthux," she said pleasantly, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. We thought it might be helpful to address some of your questions directly." Security Chief Malthor frantically worked his controls, trying to trace the signal or cut the transmission. Nothing responded. Human technology was simply operating on a level that made Vorthak systems irrelevant. "We revealed ourselves because your species had reached a critical decision point," Dr. Chen explained. "Every militaristic civilization eventually faces the same choice: evolve beyond conquest as a primary survival strategy, or continue expanding until you encounter someone who can stop you permanently." She gestured to something outside the camera's view, and the display split to show images from across the galaxy. Dozens of species, some familiar from Vorthak conquest records and others completely unknown, were shown living in peaceful prosperity on worlds the Empire had never imagined existed. "The galaxy is far more crowded than you realize," she continued. "Most species learned long ago that cooperation produces better results than domination. Those that didn't learn voluntarily were eventually taught by those of us who take collective security seriously." Admiral Gorthux found his voice, though it sounded strained even to his own ears. "What do you want from us?" "Partnership," Dr. Chen replied immediately. "Your species has impressive engineering capabilities, remarkable adaptability, and honorable military traditions. With proper guidance, the Vorthak could become valuable contributors to galactic civilization." The display changed to show technical schematics that made even experienced Vorthak engineers gasp in amazement. Fusion reactors that operated at impossible efficiency levels, materials that seemed to violate fundamental physics, and manufacturing techniques that could transform raw energy into complex devices. "This is what we're offering," Dr. Chen said. "Technology that will allow your people to build rather than conquer, to explore rather than invade, to grow in ways that benefit everyone rather than just yourselves." Fleet engineer Zalgoth studied the schematics with the intensity of someone examining religious artifacts. "Admiral," he whispered, "these designs, they could eliminate resource scarcity across our entire empire. We could build worlds instead of conquering them." Dr. Chen smiled as if she had heard the whispered comment across space. "Exactly. The universe is vast beyond imagination, Engineer Zalgoth. There's no need to fight over the tiny fraction of it that currently supports life when you can create new habitable worlds wherever you need them." The transformation in perspective was overwhelming. Everything the Vorthak Empire had fought for, every world they had conquered, every species they had subjugated, suddenly seemed not just unnecessary, but pointless. They had been fighting over scraps while surrounded by unlimited abundance. "What happens to our military?" Admiral Gorthuk asked. "Our entire culture is built around warrior traditions and the honor of conquest." "Warriors are always needed," Dr. Chen assured him. "But instead of conquering peaceful species, you could protect them. Instead of expanding through violence, you could guard the frontier against threats that occasionally emerge from the void between galaxies. Your people could become heroes rather than invaders." The display showed images of human military forces, and Zekthar finally understood what he had been fighting against. These weren't just soldiers. They were guardians who had spent centuries protecting a civilization that spanned thousands of worlds. Their fierce resistance hadn't come from desperation, but from the absolute certainty that they were defending something worth preserving. "There are things out there," Dr. Chen continued, her expression becoming serious, "that make your current expansion look like a children's game. Ancient machines that consume entire star systems, energy beings that feed on sentient thought, and worse things that we don't discuss with species that aren't ready to face them. The galaxy needs protectors, and your people could be among the finest." Communications Officer Velnath reported incoming messages from across the Vorthak fleet. Ship commanders were requesting instructions, ground forces were asking for clarification of their mission, and civilian administrators on conquered worlds were reporting that their human populations had simply vanished overnight, relocated by technologies beyond comprehension. Admiral Gorthix realized that his empire was effectively paralyzed, not by force, but by the revelation that everything they thought they knew about the galaxy was wrong. Their weapons were useless against enemies who operated on principles they didn't understand. Their conquests were meaningless against people who could relocate entire civilizations without leaving a trace. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "Take as long as you need," Dr. Chen replied. "But understand that the galaxy is watching. Other species who've faced similar choices are curious about how the Vorthak will respond to their first real test of wisdom." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence that stretched for long minutes. Finally, Zekthar spoke the thought that everyone was avoiding. "We never had a choice, did we? From the moment we entered this system, they've been controlling every aspect of this encounter." Admiral Gorthux nodded slowly. "They gave us exactly enough rope to hang ourselves, then offered to cut us down before we strangled. The question is whether we're wise enough to accept their help." Over the following days, reports continued to arrive that painted an increasingly clear picture. The Vorthak Empire's expansion had been halted not by force, but by the simple failure of their technology to function properly when they tried to move beyond their current borders. Their weapons wouldn't fire, their ships couldn't navigate, and their communications couldn't reach beyond the systems they already controlled. Meanwhile, the human offer remained open. Technical specifications arrived daily, showing technologies that could revolutionize Vorthak society. Cultural exchange programs were proposed that would allow Vorthak youth to study at universities spanning the galaxy. Military cooperation agreements promised roles in defending civilization against threats that most species never learned existed. The choice was clear, even if it was difficult. The Vorthak could continue trying to expand through conquest and face inevitable defeat by forces beyond their comprehension, or they could join a galactic community that offered opportunities for growth they had never imagined possible. Admiral Gorthix made the decision that would define his species' future. He opened a channel to the human delegation and spoke words that would be remembered in Vorthak history as the moment their people truly grew up. "Dr. Chen," he said formally, "the Vorthak Empire accepts your offer of partnership. We are ready to learn what it means to be part of something larger than ourselves." The response came immediately, warm with genuine welcome. "Welcome to the galaxy, Admiral. We're excited to see what your people will accomplish now that they're free to build instead of conquer." As Zekthar watched his ships begin receiving detailed instructions for peaceful redeployment, he reflected on the day that had changed everything. They had come to Earth expecting to meet primitives and prey. Instead, they had encountered teachers and guardians who had been waiting patiently for them to become ready for the next phase of their development. That was indeed the day he had met real terror. Not the terror of death or defeat, but the terror of realizing that everything he thought he knew about strength, courage, and survival had been the world view of a child. The humans had shown them what it meant to be truly formidable, not through the ability to destroy, but through the wisdom to protect, build, and grow. The Vorthak Empire was dead, but the Vorthak people had just begun to live.